Welcome to the BAC Podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, and Current Events. How do the events in our world today align with the Word of God? What should be the focus of the apostolic Christian in response? How do we look at worldviews through a biblical lens? Join us for an in-depth discussion, lively conversation, and so much more as we tackle these subjects in depth. Are you ready? Let's begin right now. And now the hosts of the BAC Podcast, Brian Sexton, and pastor of Bible Apostolic Church, Huntington, West Virginia, Pastor Aaron Fairburn.
And welcome to the BAC Podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, and Current Events. Brian Sexton, Pastor Aaron Fairburn. Pastor, how we doing today?
Doing great. I've been getting up in the morning and working out with my son, and I want to tell you, this morning we took it off, and it made me feel great.
Well, listen, if I would have prepared and put my headphones in like I should have, that was a rookie mistake on my part, not putting in headphones immediately and trying. There were a lot of times when I did radio, I would do it with one ear in or listening to something. A lot of times, well, musicians will do that sometimes. If I'm filling in the music department and I'm playing keyboard, I'll play with one in and one out. But when I'm podcasting, I like to have both of them in. So I apologize for not being prepared right off the bat here.
Amen.
As we record this, our area is taking on some. We talked last time about storms and times and seasons. As we record this podcast, our area is taking on a lot of water right now. So Pastor and I are keeping one eye outside the door here in the window. If you see us kind of looking up a little bit, we're keeping one eye on the weather. These springtime events are among us right now.
Yeah, every time our church is flooded, I think it has been in April or May, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we're believing that's not going to happen this time. And, it's funny because I was traveling this week and beautiful weather. It was a little cool, but, beautiful weather. And I'm not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about other things. But for this time of year, it just feels like weather just surrounds us. It really affects everything that we do.
It is, it's God's plan. We're getting ready to come up on planting season. And so, these rains prepare the ground. A lot of people don't realize, if you're not into gardening, that thunderstorms, because of the electricity in the atmosphere, they are actually, the rainwater has nitrogen, trace amounts of nitrogen in it, which feeds the plants. So thunderstorms are wonderful, and they're just preparing the soil for what's to come.
Well, I was driving down 119 the other day. I was going from Pikeville to Logan as we were coming back home, and there is a place a few miles short of Logan that people will pull off of Route 119. It's a 4-lane highway between Charleston and Pikeville, Kentucky. And it's in the mountains. So if you take that, you're going to have a lot of mountain scenery. And there are people that pull off the side of the road because there is a spring, for lack of a better term, that comes down off the mountain, and people get water off that. And my wife said something like, I don't know that I'd want to drink that. And I said, it's probably purer than the tap water you
nature's filter. That's exactly what happens is rain. Rain usually, if you see a spring, rain has went down into the percolated, in and up through the soil and through the rocks, and it cleanses it. So that water coming out, not only is it very clean, but it also is loaded with minerals that the water has dissolved in the rock. So it's very healthy.
See, you never know what you're going to get on the BAC podcast. You never know what we're going to talk about.
That's right.
And so, again, let me give you a quick reminder. Like, subscribe, comment, share. We want to hear from you. Thank you for the feedback that we've gotten so far on what we talked about last week. We're gonna put little clips on Facebook, so check out the Bible Apostolic Church Facebook page. Check out my Facebook page, and again, we'll do that from time to time. So, what we want to talk about today, and I brought this to you. Full disclosure, I'll text Pastor and I'll say, hey, I got this thought on my mind, or he'll text me about what we want to talk about. So I was thinking about intention today.
Yeah.
You know, what are your intent? And of course, you know, again, full disclosure, it's funny, and I probably should have wore that shirt today. I wore my Be Intentional shirt the last time that we recorded. I have a Cincinnati Reds sweatshirt on today, but the last time we recorded, I had a Be Intentional on that. And of course, I've written a book called Intentional Encouragement, the one thing that changes everything. So intentional to me is a word that I try to live by. And I want to talk about intention today from a couple of different areas. You know, people do things, you know, I heard a story one time about this girl that had just gotten married, and she wanted to do the family dinner, and they had done this traditional family Easter dinner, and they bought a ham, and she was doing like her grandma did, and she cut the ends off the ham because that's the way her mom did it. That's the way she was going to do it. And they just kind of did it that way. And the girl asked Grandma, why do we do it this way? I've always wondered that. And she said, well, this was as big a pan as I had. And I had to be intentional about making it fit. And the girl just thought, well, this was tradition. Sometimes people do things out of habit.
Yeah.
And sometimes people do it out of intention. So take that thought and run with it for a minute.
You know, talking about being intentional, this really goes all through your Christian life. If you're not intentional, you're probably not living your best Christian life. Mm-hmm. You know, the best givers are people that plan to, and they're intentional. The best volunteers are the people that plan to volunteer, and they're intentional about it. The best, I want to say the best, let's say the most consistent prayer lives are from people that are intentional. Mm-hmm. I was sharing this with you. When I pray, and I'm for sure not like my way is the only way. That's for sure not it. But I find I get a lot more out of setting a certain time and getting up early in the morning, and I pray at the same time every day. I get more out of that than just randomly praying throughout the day, because I can get busy. Mm-hmm. And then I forget, you know, sometimes I've been accused of both having a one-track mind, and I've also been accused of being able to do multiple things, and it just depends, right? So sometimes I can have two things going at once, but most of the time, one-track mind. So if I can get up early before I'm distracted, and I'll do that, I'll set my alarm extra early. I'll get up. It's not always easy. I'll get up, I'll make that sacrifice of getting up extra early, and I'll pray. And I've noticed that my spiritual life blossoms, mm-hmm. and it's at its peak when I'm consistent in a very early prayer. So it could be in the evening, it could be any time, but I believe intentional about, let me tell you something that I don't even know that you can have without intentionality, and that is self-control. Mm-hmm. Self-control takes intention. You have to choose, and you have to take preparations and make preparations to be able to sometimes have that self-control. Something that I noted years ago was this: I cannot control how I'm going to respond to the things that I face today. Mm-hmm. But I can control how I'm going to respond tomorrow by changing behaviors today. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, If I'm always used to acting a certain way, you come at me, I get defensive, and then I lash out in a certain way. Well, I can't just decide today I'm not going to be defensive, because there's a whole process that involves chemicals and everything else. But if I decide I'm changing that behavior, and today I start making the small steps and be intentional about it, then when somebody comes at me, I've prepared for it. And so instead of getting defensive, like for instance, in this very, very subject itself, I used to get very defensive. And, and that truthfully, when you get defensive, that's really a pride thing, and everything stems from pride. All sin really has the foundation of pride. But by being intentional and saying, okay, here's how I'm going to handle it, by understanding, and the way I did that was I said, okay, the next time I feel this way, instead of letting my emotions run wild, I'm going to let my thinking mind have its dominion and begin to ask questions of, I wonder why this person is saying this. I wonder if they intended that toward me, or if they're just saying it. In other words, I got so logical that I completely removed the emotions.
Well, here's the thing, too. You can train yourself to do things.
That's right.
Or not do things. Here's an example. Eye contact with me is critically important when I'm talking to somebody. I remember years ago at church, a guy came up to me, and I was having a conversation with somebody else, and he wanted to be in the conversation. It's not that I didn't want him in the conversation. I just was talking to that other person. I shut him out. And I went to him afterwards and I said, hey, the way I'm wired, I can get so very easily distracted. I wanted that person to know that they had my full attention. And I said, if I were talking to you, I'd want you to know you have my full attention. And he totally understood. But I had to train myself intentionally to make and keep eye contact. Something else that I do too is when I'm talking to somebody, I use their name. Quite often. I worked for somebody one time. We were talking, it was one of our last phone conversations, because I ended up leaving the company right after that. And I was talking to my boss, and I told her I used her first name in conversation quite often. She goes, if you say my name again one more time, I'm just going to scream. And I thought, I can't work for this person anymore. Because Dale Carnegie said the sweetest sound to a person's ear is the sound of their own name. And why wouldn't you want to intentionally refer to that person's name in conversation? Because it ends up building eye contact, and names in a conversation have built more bridges for me to connection than any two things I've ever done. And I do them both intentionally.
My grandpa, who was not a salesman, and yet by nature he was. Anytime I was with my grandpa, the first thing he wanted to know of the waitress, of the guy standing behind the counter, of whoever he was dealing with, was, what's your name? And then once he found out their name, he used it. Now he would address them by their name, multiple times in that conversation. And eye contact is an important thing. Usually, if someone's not looking me in the eye, depending on the conversation, you can, a lot of times your mind will immediately think, well, they feel guilty about something, or this person is so bashful, or they're not interested in what I'm saying. There's a lot of things that can be extracted from the idea of somebody not looking at you, and none of them are good. None of them are good. Of course, if somebody's staring dead at me and they don't ever blink, I'm also thinking this person's a psycho.
Well, here's the thing. We would never, it's why people, this is what I believe about social media. Okay. And I'm going to bring this back around to social media. It's the one thing that we don't do a good job of in society, is being intentional with everything that we post, or intentional with every word that we say. we've just developed a society of keyboard warriors that just spew out whatever they feel like saying. And it's like, I'll share another instance with you one time years ago. And this guy's become a friend of mine. I was on Twitter, and this guy I was interacting with was a Mountaineer fan. And I was just, I don't like West Virginia. I don't like the Mountaineers. And
that's a thunder.
Yeah, it's my Marshall coming out in me. And then he goes, you know what? If you don't like this, or you don't like what I'm saying, feel free to unfollow me. And man, that hit me right between the eyes. And I thought, I wouldn't stand there across from him and be intentionally disrespectful to him.
Yeah.
Why am I doing it here? And that's the thing that we've forgotten is, and I've told my family this, I said, my wife will say something, she's like, did you see that person's post? And I'm like, yeah, I did. And I'm like, what's the point? What's the point? I believe you should do everything with intention. I think, I intentionally put this sweatshirt on. Why? Because it's wet outside. It's a little cool. I like this sweatshirt. I wanted to wear it today. I try to do everything in my life with intention. So why then do we want to live one part of our life intentionally, but the other part of our life that we put out there on social media, it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks.
Listen, I had a horrible experience years ago on Facebook. I had someone had, I have in the past had very strong political ideas and leanings, and I wouldn't hold that information back at the time. Now I try to stay out of as much as I can. But anyways, I posted something, and somebody come on my page just blasted me. Somebody I knew. I was really shocked at how abrasive and rude and just personally attacking. I thought, man, this is kind of insane. We ended up in a back and forth that almost went to 100 comments. And it was, I've got a rule. Many years ago, I decided that, cause when I was younger, I loved to debate. I would pick an argument, but I found out that what people didn't like and what I didn't like, cause I like people, and I don't want people mad at me or whatever because of that. So I would purposefully keep my attention on the subject and never attack a person personally.
Yeah.
And it was something that I think it was a great decision on my part. And so when people do, it just really hits you a certain way. And so this person did. They were really attacking me, and I would never attack them back. It's not like you can't think of 1,000 things to say and you really want to, but you're like, I'm not going to stoop. I'm not going to do it. Well, after this was done, I realized this did not make either one of us look that good. And even though I had said nothing I was ashamed of, the fact that I was bickering back and forth, trying to defend my position and trying to, I guess, convert her as well, like once it got into it, to my position, I thought, man, and I ended up deleting the comment because I thought this is kind of shameful. Here's the thing. She had said so many hurtful things that weren't even true about me. And this is somebody that really knows me well, has known me for years. I seen this person in person 2 weeks later. And they acted like we was best buddies and nothing had happened. And I thought, what is wrong with this person?
It's because here's the thing that I'll say on this topic. People want to feel like here's a piece of verbiage that you'll hear quite a bit. Okay. I want people to feel seen. I want people to feel heard. Okay. Not everything that you think or believe should be shared.
That's right.
And guess what? In the grand scheme of things, nobody really cares.
Yeah.
And so that's where we've gotten to as a society is everything is a soundbite. Everything is a piece of content. You and I aren't doing this podcast just because we want to become the next great Christian podcasters.
Yeah.
We're not doing this podcast because we want to be the Unashamed podcast. It's not what we're doing this for. If God opens that door,
sure,
and God allows it to happen and uses this, that's awesome.
Our original intent for this podcast was really just our circle, right? The people we go to church with. And we thought, great, if it goes bigger, it goes bigger. But it's people we go to church with. It's people that we know in our organization.
Well, our intention is again, I believe every church should have a good, strong media presence.
Sure.
Our intention with this was to strengthen our media presence.
Yeah.
Using a platform that I know very well, having done 300 plus episodes of my own podcast and a lot of years of live radio and things like that. We just wanted to strengthen our media presence and things like that. But here's what I'll say. Not everything you and I talk about before we hit record ends up on this podcast. Well, it's not that. It's so much of what I learned in live radio was there are certain things that belong on the air and certain things that don't. And my wife would do, when I would do fill-in work, she would go, hey, please don't talk about these subjects. Stay away from these. And I got very good at navigating away from them. It's not that you can't give a good opinion. You learn how to give a good opinion.
Right.
But you learn to give a good opinion that's not necessarily all the things that you believe on the subject.
Sure, because the truth is, nobody knows it all. Nobody's right about everything. We offer opinions. Hey, you said something a while ago that brought back a memory. The reason that people don't find me on Facebook, I used to be on there all the time. I spend a lot of time. Matter of fact, I used to spend, no kidding, an hour or longer on a post.
Wow.
Because I would make sure that I would fact check it.
Mm-hmm.
I would make sure my grammar was just right. I wanted it to be exactly right. A lot of times I would take out half of what I'd put because I could used to put these long posts on you. And, well, you know what? One day I had an epiphany. We were talking about epiphany before this. One time I had an epiphany. People don't care what I have to say. They don't care about my opinion. I'm not changing the world by throwing my opinion out there. If I'm going to change the world, I want it to be with the gospel that I know is powerful enough to do that, because my opinion can't.
Well, my intention on posting a lot of times comes from inspiration. I'll share what I posted yesterday. And this was a thought I had marinating in my mind. If we won't trust God with everything, it's hard to trust him with anything. Let the one who sees what we can't and knows what we don't be in total control. And again, a lot of times when I post, it's from a place of, somebody told me one time, they said, I love the brand you're building with intentional encouragement. And I said to them, I was never trying to build a brand. It was just what I felt like I could bring to the table. I was intentional about the niche, so to speak, that I felt like I could fill. But I don't post every day just because, one, I don't want to get so beholden. And I know people like, I've posted 1,875 straight days. Good for you. It's like bragging about exercise.
I'm bragging about how many days I haven't posted.
Yeah, exactly. It would be like somebody saying, well, because I look at the Word of God, and Jesus talked about intention, but he talked about it in the other way. He said, don't be like the Pharisee who says, I thank God that I give this many times in the offering, or I fast this many days, or I do this many things. That's why Jesus said, what you do in secret, I'll reward you openly. I think you have to be intentional a lot of times about keeping things close to the vest.
Absolutely. It's talking is the Christian's biggest nemesis. Jesus said, you will give account for every idle word. It's amazing to me how many Christians believe that they won't give account of every idle word. In other words, what happens so often is in the early church, people believe that the moment you were baptized, you were the cleanest you would ever be. So it became a big fad in the 3rd century and 4th century and on in that vicinity of time, that people would wait until they were about to die to get baptized. Kind of, we believe baptism is part of salvation. So, what if an accident happened, right? We wouldn't wait. But they did. That's why Constantine did not get baptized until his deathbed. After he got baptized, until he died, he did not take off his baptismal robe. And so, but here's the idea. People think, okay, I can get by with whatever, and I'll just say, Lord, forgive me. And it is under the blood. You're not going to go to hell for that. You're forgiven. But you still are going to give an account for the final word.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, too, and I just happened to think of this story that I heard. This lady was taking her family on a cruise, and the cruise ship, the cruise was doing something goofy, and I think she had verified something, and then something was not right. Well, this lady posts her letter online with her account number and her address, and somebody called the cruise ship or called the cruise company with this information. And she goes to get on the cruise, and they're like, your cruise was canceled. Somebody called and canceled your cruise, and we refunded them the money. That's what I say. Don't tell everything you know. Don't post everything, every intimate detail. When I'm traveling, I don't post about where I'm at or where I'm going. My wife has asked me not to do that. So when I travel, nobody knows I'm on the road.
Sure.
Nobody knows I'm on the road. And it's just good. You have to be intentional about what you share and how much you share and what you do.
Yeah.
Because think about the number of scams that we've got going in our in our society right now. Even our phones will alert us. This is a potential scam.
Targeting. Everybody's targeted. Older people tend to be targeted the most because they're more susceptible. They're not quite as up on technology, and so a lot of times they don't realize.
Or younger people.
IRS isn't,
Or younger people. You got so many younger people that share information that they have no business sharing.
They just get LifeLock.
Well, but here's the thing, Mr. LifeLock is not going to fully protect you if you choose to put more out there.
Yeah.
We are intentionally naive because everybody thinks the consequences happen to other people.
Absolutely.
Oh, I saw that on TikTok. I'm not going to let that happen to me. Well, why are you posting it on TikTok?
Yeah.
Why are you making a TikTok video about it?
That is the curse of every young man, is they don't think it'll ever happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember when I was 18 years old. My dad had bought me a sports car. It was about 4 years old, 5 years old, and it was a Celica GTS. And I say 4 or 5, maybe it's a little bit older than that. It was 83, and I don't even remember what year it was. I guess 91. Okay, so, but I can remember being on the interstate going to Charleston. The first time I'd ever went this fast. I can remember thinking how cool it felt and how great it looked for me to see my speedometer bouncing on the 120.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know exactly how fast I was going, but I can tell you everything's that I did not consider the consequences. The problem there's two angles here. With the problem with not foreseeing the consequences is you keep doing that behavior. Eventually you will pay the piper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, if you're constantly worried about the consequences, you'll never do anything.
Well, here's the thing that I'll say. You have a lot of people that that will post about how you should be a solo entrepreneur, or you should do this business, or you should do that business, things like that. Okay. Everything that you, okay, let's say that, or, you know, I've been approached a lot of times about coaching, business coaching, sales coaching, things like that, doing that on the side. Okay. Great. If it morphs into a business, now I've got to register with the Secretary of State's office. Now I've got to pay quarterly taxes. Now I've got to do some other things that right now, as an employee of a company and getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, I don't have to do that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you could make all of this, you could have this unlimited compensation package. Okay, but in your life, when is enough?
There's different,
and I'm not knocking people that want to start their own business.
Yeah. There's different types of folks out there. Listen, for some people, owning your own business, it's the freedom that it gives.
Right.
And for other people, they're like, I would rather trade freedom for being able to sleep at night. Because the truth is, you're not going to own a business without a much higher level of responsibility, which means you're thinking about all your, what makes, and I think we've mentioned this even before on a previous podcast, what makes Donald Trump and people like that different than all other people? You cannot attain that level of being a billionaire, putting yourself out like that, if you can't shut it off and sleep at night.
Yeah. It
can't bother you. If you're worried about what people think about you, if you're worried about your reputation, if $100,000 loan, like, how am I going to get the money to pay? If that bothers you, there's no way you're going to deal in billions.
Yeah. Well, you want to know the secret to work freedom?
What's that? I think everybody wants to know that.
Yeah. You want to know the secret to work freedom? Do great work and do it consistently, because the marketplace always rewards good work, great work.
The Bible has a principle in it that follows that. A man's gift will make room for himself.
Yep.
Your talents are going to open doors for you in those areas. If you're good at sales, you will have people hunting you down. The opportunities will present themselves if you stand out.
Well, and I'm living proof of that. And I'll share a story. The last company that I worked for, my boss was retiring. She had some, and she's probably going to watch this, so we're talking about you, okay? And we're good friends, but she was retiring. She had some health concerns, and she's like, I'm going to retire. And so our director downshifted and took on both roles. And so I called our director one day, and I told her, I said, why don't you let me manage myself? And she said, okay. I said, you have enough to do as it is. You're downshifting to now take on the job of two people. Here's what I will do. This is what I want to do. Let me manage myself. Let me manage my schedule. Let me just do my thing. We'll talk every couple of weeks as we need to talk, or I'll text you if I need to talk to you off the record or off the books. I said, but I don't want you to feel like you need to manage me. Let me manage myself. And she said, okay, that's fine. It was the greatest freedom. It was the greatest responsibility. But what I did was I said, okay, I took it upon myself to go, I've got to raise my game to another level. And I was able to do that. And it was incredible freedom that I had.
Yeah.
So much so to the point where we would have the job that I did. I went into territories. I solidified those territories for a period of time, and then I would bounce out. To the point I led our calls with other leaders, and I would say, this is what I need. This is what I've got to have. This is when I expect it, but here's what I'm going to do. And she was on that call with me, and I said, I'm sorry that I jumped in. And she said, no. That was my expectation, that you would go ahead and do that anyway. When you do great work and you start to build trust with leaders, that trust permeates into the marketplace and opportunities begin to open up for you. That's why you should be intentional about everything you say and do on social media, because people are watching.
Yeah.
And if you want a better job, don't be posting stupid stuff on your Facebook page. You have the right to do that, but people also look at that. But they're also looking at, how do other people view you? How do other people see you? If I called your ex-boss, what kind of things would they say about you? It's intentionally living your life. And we talked about personal standards one day. It's intentionally living your life to where your personal standard is, I do great work. And if I have the opportunity, and and this has worked for me in the last several companies that I've worked for, my personal mission statement is, I do great work. I'm going to intentionally do great work because the marketplace always rewards great work.
That's right. Let me tell you, the spiritual world always rewards great faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're talking about. You don't do great work without faithfulness, right? And bringing intentionality back to a spiritual thing, which everything we talked about can always have a parallel in the spirit world. But being intentional about coming to church, being intentional about being charitable, being intentional about kindness. Do you ever think about being intentional about kindness, about being gentle?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think about being intentional about meekness and about humility?
Mm-hmm.
You can be very intentional. You're not just going to, humility and meekness are yes, meekness can be a trait in someone that they can naturally have. Humility, somebody can lean toward it a little bit. But here's the truth. The truth is that these things are made more than they're just innate in somebody.
Right.
Your upbringing, it's from training. And so you can have humility, but it takes intention. Humility, true humility in a religious, from a religious standpoint, particularly from a Christian or Judeo-Christian standpoint, is this. It's the acknowledgement that you can do nothing of yourself, that it takes Christ in you, right? It takes, only through God are we able to accomplish, only through God. Often when I'm praying, I'll tell the Lord, Lord, I will fail if you leave me for one moment. I would be a failure.
100%.
And it's true. It's not just something I'm saying. It's something I've actually realized in my life. But it's intentional. Meekness. Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
I love his. It's not, I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate or all-encompassing of it, but he captures a particular corner of meekness that I think is a great understanding. And he says that meekness is having the ability to be a monster, but not using it, having self-control to not use it. I could destroy this person right now.
Yeah.
But I choose not to.
Well, we've often, and I said this in my first book, People Buy From People, never confuse meekness for weakness.
That's right. Because
we think of meek people and we think, well, they're just mild-mannered, they're timid, things like that. Meekness is understanding, it's really, to your point, it's understanding what you have, what you know, what you can do, but not being overtly arrogant about it.
That's right.
And again, it's intentionally building consistency. I could go around and puff out my chest and go, I'm really good at X, Y, Z. Okay. I might say that to people privately, but they're going to know it anyway. It's about publicly just stepping back and going, okay, I don't have to be the big dog. At 42 or at 32, Pastor, I might have thought, I want to be the big dog. At 52, I want to be a sneaky millionaire. I want to dress like this and have $500,000 in the bank, just because, again, I don't have to flaunt what I have, do, or be, but I can walk into a room and just be myself and be intentional about how I carry myself, how I handle myself, things like that. And people, they don't have to know everything about you. They don't have to know everything, what you have or things like that. But we're so intentional at times about saying, well, look what I've got. Look where I've been. Look what I've done. Well, one, nobody cares. And two, Jesus said, you've been faithful in the little things. You've been faithful in the few things. That's what he told the in the parable of the talents. You've been faithful in a few things. I'm going to make you ruler over many. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Yeah. And so that's the intentional part I want to be, is I want to be faithful in the little things. How you treat people in interactions. I want to be better at that. I want to make people feel like, hey, you know what the best thing about Brian is when I'm in a conversation with him, he makes me feel like the most important person in the world. There was a long time I didn't do that. You can ask my wife. There was a lot of years in our marriage, she didn't feel like she was the most important person. Now you can ask her and she goes, oh yeah, Bryce and I are the two most important people in his life. And we know it because of the way he intentionally carries himself and shows it.
The Bible says it's the little foxes that spoil them. Mm-hmm. It's the little things that was, but also the temple or the castle is made by many small stones.
Yeah.
And every one is important. So the castle or the temple that you're building is made up of many small stones, many small actions, many small, and going back to one more time with intention. I would say this. I would ask the question, what is it that you're doing that is intentionally cultivating the fruits of the Spirit in your life? Mm-hmm. What is it that you're doing? How is it that you are planning to have more love in your life? And how is it that you're planning to have, and the secret is what you sow, you reap. If you sow love, you reap love. Mm-hmm. If you sow love, you'll have more love. I have some cousins that when they were kids, they wrote this song. And it says, love is like a shiny penny. Hold it tight and you won't have any. So give it freely and you'll have so many. It roll right onto the floor. And so I love that little song. Just growing up, I thought, man, that's a great little song. And that's what love is like. Mm-hmm. Love is, I assume they wrote that song. I'm sure they did. So, but that's how love is. The more love you give, not only the more you receive back in return, but the more love you have to give. The more grace that you give to people, the more grace you have to give. The more you use self-control, the more self-control you have to give. Self-control, by the way, science has figured out that you have a limited amount of self-control. And the way you get more is by utilizing it. The more you use self-control, the more you'll have to use. And once self-control is, once the amount, I know this sounds a little, but check out Andrew Huberman's podcast. This guy does it. He talks about the science in one of his podcasts, the science of self-control. Once you use it up, it's gone in whatever aspect for the day or for that time period, until it replenishes itself. So be careful with your self-control and intentionally build it. Have a plan. If you want to be a great Christian, if you want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant, have a plan to grow yourself. What is your next step in God? Where do you need to go next? If you're not growing, you remember what old Ricky Bobby said?
You ain't first, you're last.
You ain't first, you're last. Listen, you need to have this mindset that says, okay, what is my next step to grow in Christ. And if you're not growing in Christ, then something's wrong. You'll never arrive at where you're like, okay, I'm done growing. There's no more to do. If you get there and you think you're there, you for sure are not, okay? There's always something to work on. No one is perfect in this flesh, no matter. Jesus Christ is the only person that walked in flesh that walked perfectly.
Yeah.
None of us will ever achieve that. The purpose is to constantly strive for it. So if you're going to live an intentional Christian life, you've got to plan these things out. How are you training yourself?
Yeah.
The Lord trained me in trust by, particularly, I used to have such an anxiety about preaching. And I would so over prepare and my nerves would get, but what happened is one day I was in prayer and I felt the Lord speak to me and tell me to stop over preparing and just begin to seek relationship and be consistent in prayer, which I at the time, I was already consistent in prayer. But what I had done is I started focusing on making sure every single day that my relationship with God was right. And all of a sudden, the Lord began to give me what I was going to preach. And little by little, it's like the Lord would wait a little longer. Mm-hmm. And that anxiety that I used to experience completely vanished. One day, I'll never forget it, that I had went to preach. The only time since I've been pastor, I went to preach for somebody. Mm-hmm. And I got up at 5 a.m. and I'm praying, God, what do you want me to preach today? And I think the service started at 1 or 2. And the Lord was not inspiring me for anything. And I said, Lord, so we're sitting in the parking lot. It's about an hour before church, and I am going through my notes, trying to feel some inspiration in something. Nothing. I pulled one out. I left it up. It was time to walk in. We walk in, and I thought, well, that's just what I'm going to preach, And I get in there, and they have service. Things really get exuberant, and I think, oh, they're not going to have any preaching. And they do that, and everybody goes, sits down. They said, now we're going to have Brother Fairburn come and preach. And I thought, oh, Lord. And so I get up, I open my iPad, and I turn it on, and there's my notes. And at that moment, the Lord sat down on me. I could feel the Lord change the direction. I closed my iPad, and I began to preach from straight inspiration as the Lord gave it to me. And when I left, I just said, Lord, thank you. I should have known just to trust you. Yeah. Because he'll never fail you. If you'll have trust, he'll never fail you. And so I've learned that. And so the Lord, my whole point to this is the Lord taught me little by little. He didn't start me out waiting that late. He started me out not giving me my sermon until Friday evening. And that's the same way you're going to be a better Christian. You're going to take that thing you're working on, and you're going to take it little by little, stone by stone. You're going to build this temple, and whatever it is, stone by stone. Yeah. And so if you'll start small and have a plan, and it's hard to be intentional without a plan. Yep. Have a plan. Have a plan for to be a successful Christian.
What a great place to end it right there. Please intentionally do us a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the BAC podcast with as many people as you can. We're putting little shorts out there for every podcast so you can see what we're talking about, things like that. But if we could say anything today, just live life with intention. Be intentional in everything you do. For Pastor Aaron Fairburn, I'm Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us today on the BAC podcast. We'll see you next time. Be blessed in Jesus' name. And thank you for watching today.
Thank you for joining us today on the BAC Podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, and Current Event. Bible Apostolic Church is located at 3521 16th Street Road, Huntington, West Virginia. Service times are Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for Sunday school, 11 a.m. for evangelistic service, and Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. for Bible study. For more information on Bible Apostolic Church, please go to the Bible Apostolic Church Facebook page. God bless you, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on the BAC Podcast.